The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr.
Andrew
Speaker.
Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wait until tomorrow, they said. One sleep to go, which was a bit rich for a government that spent 7 years sleeping at the wheel. If this is a plan that's working, then why have we seen today one of the biggest spends on alleviating child poverty, which this government has known of for 7 years and done nothing about until now? Why has this government been panicked into doing something about the desperate Aucklanders who cannot get to own their own home? That hardly features in the budget at all, and we know why, because they cobbled it together in just the last few weeks alone. Mr. Speaker, I move that all the words after that be deleted and replaced with, "This House has no confidence in a government which has failed to deliver the jobs, the incomes, or the real surplus they promised, squandered the golden economic weather, failed to diversify our economy, failed to meaningfully fix the housing crisis, neglected regional New Zealand, and is tired, out of touch, and out of ideas." Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is demonstrating management by sleepwalk, because that's what this budget is. This is a budget that manages the decline. There is nothing in this for the long-term future of New Zealand that will give hope and confidence to those who are working hard and struggling to get ahead. So we see now this surplus of $176 million for next year. Well, just remember last time they promised a surplus of over $300 million, and the deficit is over $600 million. The billion-dollar gap that has materialised in 1 year alone. So my message to New Zealanders is this: they might have promised it, they might have budgeted for it, but you can't trust it because it never ever happens. It's a continuation of the dance of the seven veils. And poor old Bill English there, ever since about 2010, another veil comes off and the promise is made. And in 2011, another veil comes off and the promise is made again. And we've had that repeatedly. And now we've had another veil removed, and we know that there's still more to go. I don't know what he's trying to hide. Some sort of fiscal gender reassignment or something. Who knows what it is? But he cannot produce a surplus, and this is not a real surplus in this budget. And he knows it. And New Zealanders will see it for what it is, a desperate government that cannot fulfil the core election promise that it made last year, that it will return the books to a balance and a surplus. And there's a good reason why. Good governments manage the government's books to achieve a surplus. There's a reason why the last Labor government managed the government's books to achieve 9 successive surpluses. Because when you get a surplus, you do the stuff that builds a nation. You can put in place your New Zealand super fund to pre-fund superannuation. Because when you take a close look at these books, what you see is that by 2018, the cost of New Zealand superannuation is going to rise, it's going to increase by nearly $1 billion a year in just 3 years' time. And what is this government doing for it? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. That is the disgrace of this government. No forward-looking, no sense of the future, manage it by sleepwalking, hope that nobody notices, and come back next year and it'll all be the same again. That's what this budget represents. There's no future in this budget. There's no hope in this budget. And the next generation, the next government, and the future generations of New Zealanders are going to have to cobble together and patch up the failures of this government, including meeting the cost of New Zealand superannuation. Because this mob over here has no sense of future and doesn't know what to do about it. So they crib around the edges. $1 million here, $1 million there. It's not enough to build a strong, resilient New Zealand. They failed. They have failed. So we've had the surplus. We've had the surplus chimera. We've had the ethereal result. It won't happen. And then we've got their challenge to deal with child poverty. Well, we'll give them some credit for that. They've taken a step. They've taken a step. They've increased benefits, but they've paid for it by taking it out of the Future Building Initiative, KiwiSaver. They've taken away the kickstart for those future generations of New Zealanders who need and know they need to save for their retirement. All those parents lining up to sign their kids up for it because they know that at least if they get that, at least if they get that kickstart, then by the time they get into their adult lives, they've got a little nest egg to continue to build on. It's just that incentive you have to when you're a youngster to carry on the saving. This government steals from the next generation and they don't know what to do about the next. That's what they're doing. And they're taking it off the top of working for families to pay for it. This is a fiddling around budget. This is a fudget budget. They're doing it again. They've got no long-term plan. And then there's the initiatives on housing. Well, this is the biggest rort, of course. This is the biggest rort. They've got new tax plans, new rules that even Bill English, he proudly announces them today. We've got new rules on tax. 2 days ago, he was saying they probably won't work. I don't know how it got left in the speech when 2 days ago he was saying they won't even work, but he's put them in there. I want to say this about the House Bill program, because the Labor Party has been saying for some years, the way to deal with the housing supply problem, the way to make sure that more Aucklanders get into an affordable home is that the government, the state, must lead the house building program.
Yes.
So I credit this government for taking the first step of saying they will do that, of putting land aside. But I want to say this, that we will support that initiative on one condition. And I look at John Key, and I look at Bill English, and I look at Nick Smith, and I look at Stephen Joyce, and I look at Paula Bennett. None of whom will look back.
No.
And I say to each of you, because you're the ones in charge of housing, you know what's going on, make this promise to New Zealanders. Make this promise to New Zealanders that every single one of the houses built on the land that you've released and in your announcement today will be an affordable house that ordinary New Zealanders can get into. Make that promise today. You've got a dozen TV cameras around here you can make it to. Make the promise today, Mr. Prime Minister. Don't get on your hindquarters in 15 minutes' time and flap about like a rooster on heat and give your usual dog and pony routine. Make a genuine promise, one that you're prepared to stick by. Be straight with New Zealanders. Tell them we are serious about affordable housing. Make sure those houses are affordable houses. And to Paula Bennett I say, make sure you discharge your responsibilities to all New Zealanders, to good New Zealanders, the hard-working New Zealanders who still hold on to that dream of getting their own home. And make sure you deliver. Your failure to deliver, if you cannot guarantee, if you will not guarantee, Nick Smith, that every single one of those houses will be an affordable home that ordinary New Zealanders in Auckland can get into, then you will have failed. You will have failed, New Zealanders. And you will have failed the test that you've set for all governments, which is to look after average New Zealanders, because so far all you've done is look after your rich mates. That is not a policy. Your home build policy is not a policy for the property developers who contribute so handsomely to National Party coffers. It ought to be a promise to ordinary New Zealanders who want only to get into their own home. And that's what I ask you to do. That's what I'm asking you to do. I want to say this about ACC. We've had the repeat of the promise about ACC, and we know that it's not a promise. We know that it's not a promise. It could happen. It might happen. It's 2 years away. We've got further work to do on it. And so I say this to Nikki Kay and to Bill English and to John Key. Make the promise. Look New Zealanders in the eye and say that you will cut ACC levies. You could do it now. Sue Moroney's right. You could do it now. You haven't. You've held on to the cash. You've deprived good businesses and hard-working New Zealanders of their cash. And now you promise that it might happen sometime in the future. Make the promise now. Mr. Prime Minister, look in those TV cameras when you're up there prancing around and make the promise to good New Zealanders that you will see through to make those ACC cuts so Kiwis will have some money back in their pockets. Make a promise you're prepared to stand by. Make a promise that New Zealanders can rely on and trust. It'll be the first one in your political career. Mr. Speaker, this is a disappointing budget in so many other ways. This is a budget where New Zealanders were hanging out looking for an expression of hope for the future. A government 7 years in office, and that has enjoyed the best of times, record high dairy prices, record high export volumes, growth of over 3%. Now we know it's all going down. You look at the projections, it's all about to go down. This is as good as it gets. Well, New Zealanders deserve better. Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders deserve better. They deserve a government that is thinking about the regions, that's thinking about what is happening to the regions. When that dairy cash dries up and those small towns and hamlets across New Zealand struggle to wonder what to do next, when the farmers and the stock and station agents and all those who contract to the farming sector have to buckle down and batten down the hatches and wondering what to do next, they're going to look at this government and say, you let this happen. This didn't have to be like this. You had the opportunity. You had the good times. You could have prepared better. And they will say, and we will say, you blew it. Bill English, John Key, you blew it. And you've turned up today with a budget that just continues the same sleepwalking, somnambulant management that we've got used to for the last 7 years. And Mr. Speaker, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. New Zealanders deserve better, and we need better. We are facing some difficult times ahead. The government knows it. We all know it. New Zealanders know it, and they were looking for an expression, for a statement of vision and leadership, such as we've never seen before with this government. And we haven't got it. It's been more of the same. Fiddle around the edges, faff around the sides, and carry on as if no one's noticing. Well, Mr. Speaker, they are noticing. What we now need is a government that is genuinely focused on the future. That's not just about dealing with the issues of making the books give the appearance of a surplus that isn't going to happen, but a government that is focused on building a nation, on giving people opportunities. And fine to lift the benefits, fine to help those people, even though you're making it harder for sole parents with kids at the age of 3 and over. That's going to be the real hardship. How are those folks going to cope? Fine to sort of make some of those gestures. But what those people who are out of a job want is a job. What those people who are desperately in need of more work, not the 1 hour jobs that Stephen Joyce promotes and encourages, not the part jobs, not even half jobs, the sort of minuscule jobs, real jobs that mean they can earn a living income and get ahead. That's what New Zealanders want. They can't even keep their promise to add the 150,000 jobs by next year. They've had to abandon that one. They can't even meet the promise to lift incomes by $7,000 a year extra by next year either. They've had to push that out too. They know how bad things are. And they serve us up this sort of mess of pottage today and pretend that it's all sweet and rosy. Well, it's not. And New Zealanders know it. And New Zealanders are hanging out for a government that is serious about lifting all New Zealand, serious about what's happening in the regions, serious about what's happening down on the farm, serious about what's happening in small and medium-sized enterprises. Because there's nothing in this for them except continuing to hold on to the ACC levies that they don't need to. And they've whacked on a few extra taxes, the departure and arrival tax. And they're going to tax every user of the telecommunication services with a new levy on the operators, $150 million a year. You know who's going to pay for that? You know who's going to pay for that? Ordinary New Zealanders. And you know why they think that that measure is the okay thing to do? Because they don't care about ordinary New Zealanders. That's why for 7 years they've shut them out of their own home. That's why for 7 years they haven't cared about those living in dire poverty. They just don't care. And we've seen more of that in this budget today. And so New Zealanders need a government that is focused on a number of core things. Diversifying our economy, making sure that the state plays its role in investing and encouraging private investment in other sectors in the economy to boost and diversify it, to making sure that our people, our education system is prepared for the future, preparing young people for the jobs of tomorrow, not repeating the jobs of today. Really, genuinely fixing our housing crisis. Nice to have the building plan, but it won't be fast enough. And there will still be people without a home in years to come. And I think of people like Gene Simmons, not Gene Simmons, Gene Harris. Gene Harris.
Order.
I think of people like...
Order. 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 Andrew Little.
There's Jerry Brownlee. Jerry Brownlee says he was asleep. Well, he's woken up after 7 years now. He's woken up after 7 years and come to life. I think of people like Gene Harris. Gene Harris, who is in his 30s. And he's a marketing manager. And he rents a 2-bedroom flat in Hillcrest on the North Shore with his partner and his baby. And he contacted us to tell us, because he's sick and tired of this government and its arrogance and its contempt and at this government laughing at people like him. And he told us this. He said, the opportunities are few and far between. And even if you're on a good wage, you can't get ahead, and there's something just not right about that. Like so many thousands of other New Zealanders. A good man, struggling, working hard to get ahead, and he cannot because of the failures of this government. That's what this government represents. That's what this government has achieved. Let down far too many others. And so Gene Harris is looking forward to a government that is serious about building the nation, building our economy, strengthening it, giving him and his family an opportunity, letting them realise their dreams of home ownership and a secure future. And then there's Simon Paterson, who's also been in touch with us, who is an IT manager from Mosgiel, who has his family. And like many other Kiwis who live in the regions, he is sick and tired of seeing the regions neglected. And he told us this. He said, middle New Zealanders like me are feeling increasingly left out in terms of stuff like healthcare and education. And we know that those figures on education today aren't enough to fill the gap that's been slowly developing in funding for that sector. And he said, there's been tax breaks for the rich, but nothing for anyone else. And that's how he summarises this government, and it's impossible to disagree with him. Mr. Speaker, we need a government that's focused on the future, that's focused on all New Zealand, that wants to fix the real problems, that is thinking far ahead, that's not tinkering at the edges, that's not sleepwalking around letting more and more New Zealanders down, that's creating those real opportunities, that when it says it's going to generate more housing, seriously does so, that when it says it's going to lift incomes by $7,000 a year, actually is serious and genuine and honest about it and does so. Not like this one. Not like this government that loosely makes promises it has no intention of keeping. Because that's what characterises this government time and time again. It's time, Mr. Speaker, to have a government that can write a budget that is good for New Zealand, that is good for all New Zealanders, that makes a difference, that will support the wealth generators and the wealth creators, that sustains the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the dreamers, the doers, not the faffing around the edges, supporting the extremely rich who contribute to the National Party coffers, but does nothing for the vast majority of the rest of New Zealand.